Welcome back to another episode of the Canon on the Boomer Bus channel. I'm your host Terry, and we haven't done this in a while, but we're going to be talking about the state of comic book movies. We're not breaking this down scientifically. We're not going through numbers and all of that different stuff. This is really just an off the cuff conversation, so it'll be kind of more freestyle. But I wanted to discuss it. It's a lot going on again. I haven't done much of anything. I mean, I could have covered Loki and stuff like that. I don't necessarily have a lot of time for that. And there's been no movies that I really rushed out. Obviously, the Marvel's out. I haven't seen it. Don't plan on going to see it. I might watch it at home, but don't plan on going to the movies to see it. I saw the end credit scene, but there's much bigger stuff going on than that. With so much news at Marvel, first we had the book coming out telling us a lot of behind the scenes stuff in past projects. Then we had articles coming out talking about what's going on now. And now we have official news coming out about the changes happening at Marvel. And then, of course, with the strike, James Gunn, who is part of the writing union, he couldn't write. And then the actors, you couldn't shoot anything, so the DCU's whole production was at a standstill. But since then, we have some new casting news and just some new things that are coming out. But overall, there definitely is a shift in the discussion. So although we're not doing this scientifically, you know me, I like to keep things above board. So when there's a claim, when you make a claim, you support evidence. Evidence could look a lot of different ways. So for me, really, I think when I'm talking about the state of comic book movie genre and all that, mainly my biggest evidence is anecdotal in terms of, I don't want to say the zeitgeist because that's the whole culture, but anecdotal in terms of my bubble. And my bubble isn't necessarily small because none of us are if you use technology, but the people that are fans at the same level you are. You might know people that are bigger fans. You know people that aren't really fans. We all have family members or co-workers that know nothing about this. And obviously you got the internet in terms of whatever groups you're in. So that's how I'm kind of gauging it. And for the longest time, I gauge a lot of things by the people who have no clue, who don't follow this stuff. So when I have friends who are not movie people or superhero people or comic book people mention a movie, well, I know it must be penetrating much larger than just my little circle, because now people who aren't even into this stuff hear about it. And so those are different things. But number one, before we talk about anything, we have to establish the fact that a lot of people don't like to hear. The fans like me of this material, the hardcore comic book fans especially, we are the very small minority of this movie going audience. The only reason we're talking about Marvel or any movies in these genres making the money they do or being the hits that they are because they hit all levels of the consumer. And the people who are, again, big into this stuff, they're a small number, and we got to accept that. I'm a part of that. We got to accept that. So the conversations, I think, they get turned around when people are talking about what's accurate to the comics or what's accurate in terms of a story or a character and all that. And that honestly is not the main concern for these movies, because that isn't what makes them money. So that needs to be kept in mind as we all go forward. So what have we seen? We've seen, I would say, a variety of success in projects that are outside the main studios. Well, Marvel was a studio. DC wasn't a studio until now, but still. DC Universe, Marvel Universe, Marvel proper, not the actual Marvel comics, but the Marvel movies proper. So not including X-Men and all that. So when I say the outside stuff, you got the X-Men, you got some of the offshoot stuff, blah, blah, blah. Again, you have some success there, but in terms of the main two players, we've seen a gigantic change in the industry because of what Marvel was able to do with a cinematic universe. And then you saw DC really, I would say, pretty much miss on their cinematic universe while still sparking some fandoms, but definitely having big hits with their properties around the cinematic universe. So that's when you think about Joker winning the best actor at the Oscars and making $1 billion. You think about the Batman with Matt Reeves being another Elseworld thing, making big money. You think about some of the best TV shows with Harley Quinn, Peacemaker. I forgot what the name because I stopped watching it. What is it? Doom Squad, something like that. I forgot what they call it. My Doom Patrol. There you go. But some really, I would say, just some really emotional and sci-fi heavy dramas that did well in TV. So we've seen a little bit of the industry get shaken up in different ways from both of these things. And now we're in a spot where obviously the DC universe has started to somewhat reset itself and go in a different direction with James Gunn. But then we have Marvel, which is probably the spotlight right now, for the first time being in a position where they are not the industry leaders and they are not the quality leaders that they were before. And now officially, or almost officially, they're switching gears and we haven't seen that. Now, that's the thing though. When you think about, we go back 2008, so over 10 years, and it feels like a long time, I get it, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not as long as these other genres. It's not as long as these other mediums. So when we see some things, it feels like the sky is falling because we never saw it, but we haven't had a lot of time to see it. I mean, if you want to look at the Infinity Saga as one piece, you can for the MCU, but in total, this is still really its first kind of go at it, even now as we sit in phase 4. And so we can't really say it's abnormal because if you look at a genre like westerns or romantic comedies or spy thrillers, whatever, things that have been made for like multiple decades, and you can see the different peaks and valleys and changes that happen within those genre of movies, then it probably doesn't seem as weird to see that comic books are going through a shift. But kind of what got us to this shift? And I think about a number of different things because, again, as I mentioned, Marvel was really successful because it hit all levels of the consumer. It was a thing where you could bring your kids if you want to just get out the house or get them out the house or have them watch something. Or if you were a big fan yourself and you wanted to watch something and that was also appropriate where you could bring the kids with you because you can't get somebody to watch them. Or you want to go on a date night, or you're just a movie fan, or you're just a fan of this stuff. Like, no matter what, it was really a spot for anybody to come in and enjoy it. So with that being said, I think again that led to the success for Marvel, where they were able to again hit different levels of the audience and not only make the commercial success in the box office, but they were able to make the critical success as well because they were making things that were pleasing and efficient, or I wouldn't say efficient, effective by themselves as standalones. Now, the beginning, Iron Man obviously had great praise and you needed that to kick it off, but you look at some of the following projects, they weren't great hits and with the critics or with the fans, but they continue to build onto something. And then obviously Avengers kind of set them up. So I think what it was is that Marvel had the cachet with both the critics and the audience and the financial people to where they could do, I wouldn't say whatever they want, but they definitely gained a lot more trust where they could try things. And with that, you kind of really got into too much of a good thing. Now, the articles, the books, and things that they all pretty much hint that Kevin Feige was stretched too thin, and that he had a heavy hand in some of these things, or sorry, all of these things, from every aspect with the project. And so he was pretty much the quality control, but he also was the guiding vision and voice. And so I could kind of see where you might feel like Marvel got to a point where it was a little boilerplate. Like, okay, here's the movie. Here's the points we need to continue the saga. And you need this type of comedy beat. You need this type of scene, blah, blah, blah. The rest you can fill in. So you gave a director a template and they colored it the way they wanted to color it. And so while the movies look different and feel a little different, they all kind of had the same thing. But again, I think you got to a point where it was too much of a good thing. Now, most people are going to point to Disney Plus, where the wheels kind of fell off. Disney Plus also coincides with Disney changing leadership. And it's been confirmed that the mandate, especially after COVID, was make as much as possible. And so with Kevin Feige being stretched, the quality wasn't the same as some people would say. But I think the bigger issue, and maybe this is just me, I think that the universe started to unravel. I think it completely unraveled after Endgame. Now, I have my own issues with Endgame itself, and to me, that was kind of that was a red flag to what was to come. But still, you had Endgame, and I was like, okay, after Endgame, things kind of to unravel. Because at first, you get, what's it called? WandaVision. So Scarlet Witch, what's she up to post Endgame? Okay, that's fine. Now she does some big things that affects the world. You don't really hear anything about it. And then she doesn't show up until Doctor Strange, where again, you didn't hear anything about it. She's just been gone. Okay. Then you get Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where what is Falcon up to and what is the Winter Soldier up to post Endgame? This is dealing directly with the blip, which nothing else has done. And I think, honestly, that was the number one sin of the post Endgame continuity, because it all unraveled, but that started with the blip, where you had, I believe originally there was some type of virus that was supposed to be the main incident in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but because of COVID, they switched it up. But either way, they decided to deal with the blip and how that displaced people and all these different things of the actual ramifications of the world. And to me, I needed it. I didn't need super detail, but I needed to know that, much like when aliens come to New York and destroy it, I need the next projects to know that people acknowledge, yeah, that happened. So there's murals. There's people that love the Avengers for what you did. You saved me in New York, whatever. And then there's people that hate them. You brought that upon us. But then you get to a guy like even Zemo, which I think Civil War is full of plot holes, to be honest. But even then, you get a guy like Zemo that's like, okay, in Sokovia, y'all did this. I was here, that affected me. Even the one mom that was like, her son died in Sokovia. Like, so there's continuous examples where we see the continuity going through. But then you get into, like I said, WandaVision, there's not a lot of mention. And then to get to Doctor Strange, there's not a lot of mention. Even in Winter's or Falcon and Winter Soldier, there's not a lot of mention about what Wanda did. That was their teammate. No one really said anything, but they dealt with the blip. They were really the only project to really deal with it, and they didn't deal with it deeply, but they dealt with it enough. And I was like, okay, cool. Now, was there anything game breaking there? No. But I would say, for me, you're in New York, and I forgot exactly who this group was, but they're very important politicians. And there was an attack. Why is Spider-Man not around? And I've heard people I respect say that this isn't a Spider-Man project. This isn't this person's project. They don't need to show up. And so many people ran with that for so long that it became like accepted for a lot of people. But I think as we sit here now, it's very evident that that is not how it works in a cinematic universe. Because yes, the movies need to stand alone on their own. Yes, you can make projects where everybody's not in it, but you still have to make it make sense. When your response is this isn't their movie, that's just you not taking the time to build out the world enough to make it make sense. I'm not saying Spider-Man had to be in it to be good. What I'm saying is the scenario you presented, Spider-Man should have been there. And so now we're losing continuity there, and that was a red flag. But Spider-Man's a big character. Tom Holland contracts, I get it. But we started to see going forward. And so projects after that with Disney Plus started to spin out of control because we introduced new people, and with new people we had new problems, and those problems never crossed over into anything else. And so we have, let's just say with what is that thing called? Was it just called Hawkeye? I guess. Anyway, so with Kate Bishop Hawkeye, you got Kingpin apparently running this thing in New York. And again, you got so many heroes in New York. So Kingpin, never once mentioned, never mentioned after. That's a big deal, especially if he's doing it during the blip. Because yeah, half the world was gone, but you still had heroes. Nobody said nothing about Kingpin. And then nobody said nothing after that. Then you got Miss Marvel with Kamala. You got this whole other dimension. Like, never brought up, never told to anybody. That's another issue. And then that just keeps going on and on and on with Disney Plus and movies, where we got all these new problems that are going on with these new characters that are fairly world threatening, and they never get addressed. Whether you're talking about the Eternals with I forgot, was it I was gonna say Timu. That's the I forgot the name of the celestial coming out of Earth, halfway out of Earth. No one's talking about it. Arsham the Judge pops up. The whole world probably saw him. I'm judging the world. Never talked about again. And so now the universe that I would not say was the reason Marvel was successful, but it was definitely a big factor. It was one of the big factors. That is starting to unravel. That started to unravel. And now one of the main draws that kept everything together, as far as it connected everything. So if I am not a fan of Captain Marvel as a character, or I don't like the choice of Brie Larson, or I don't think the trailer looked good, whatever, I'm still going to go because I want to see how it ties in. And so again, not the biggest factor, because there's definitely people that didn't watch everything, but for a lot of people, or I would say for a significant amount of people, there became a feeling of everything's connected. So even if it doesn't directly give you like what you want, it might impact the people that you care about, the characters that you care about. And so that gives you an extra reason to consider to go. As that unraveled, it became, or it is in a place where it's like, okay, well, this stuff doesn't really seem to be in continuity. So I don't feel I need to go. I'll just go for the things that I like. So actually, this is a perfect example. As I said, I'm not a Ms. Marvel fan. I didn't go to see the Marvels. I went to see Captain Marvel because that was at a time where I felt I needed to. Now, not only are things unraveling in the cinematic universe, in the real world, we know that Marvel is off the rails with their direction. So the stuff they have in there probably won't mean much going forward. And so if it doesn't look good to me, it's a higher chance I'm not going to go. Now you multiply that by probably 10 across the world where people who aren't even fans of this stuff, there's a lot less people probably willing to go. And so that in terms of the box office and everything and the financials, that I think it plays a big part of it too. Now, the other part that I think is hand in hand with the cinematic universe is the Marvel brand. So not only is it, hey, the Marvel brand means this is going to impact the stories you care about and the characters you care about. The Marvel brand also was, we're going to give you something good. And that has evaporated too because you had too many misses. And I mean, I think you had a few misses. Nothing's 100% a miss, but I think you had a few misses, but you pretty much had all divisive movies. Even the second Black Panther, which was a hard task for anybody, that's still going to be a divisive movie. And that was one of your more stronger properties. Everybody loved Wakanda, but Chadwick gone, and it was what it was. That came out divisive. So now you're pumping out content, and we're not making sure it's tied together, and the quality's not there. And to an extent, DC suffered from some of the same stuff by their own choice. They wanted to disassociate from Zack Snyder. They wanted to move things in a different direction. But at the same time, they just weren't putting out quality things. And so because they weren't putting out quality things, their reputation had already went from this probably won't be good to this more than likely isn't going to be good, or at least it's not going to be worth my time. Added on to that, when you announce somebody coming in new for a new direction, we don't know that any of these movies are going to mean anything in the new universe. So what's the point in watching them? Now, again, you're going to have people that's my favorite character. I want something to go do, or I like science fiction. I like superheroes. They're going to do that. But by the masses, all the audiences, they're not going to come out for those movies. And so you saw a similar thing happen with DC earlier that is now happening with Marvel. Now, Marvel also has another issue that actually DC faced already, which is you have an actor that's going through some legal troubles. And for whatever reason, maybe because it's more simple, Jonathan Majors' troubles is a little bit more well known. A little bit. I wouldn't say a lot. The average person is not following this news. They didn't follow it about Ezra Miller. They ain't following about Jonathan Majors. But I do think, number one, because he's black. So we still don't have as many black celebrities as we do non-black celebrities. So black celebrities, that's going to penetrate that culture. But then, like I said, it's a very simple, forward, domestic, assault. And so that already is going to have people talking. So I don't think it's a massive news story for everybody. But in terms of what decisions have to be made, it's definitely affecting. Now, DC was in a different spot because they knew they were more than likely going to be in a space where they were going to pivot. Marvel wasn't planning on pivoting, even though things weren't going well, or I should say maybe Marvel did know, but we couldn't definitively say things weren't going well until very recently. In terms of the Ant-Man Quantumania and now the Marvels with their box office and the TV shows not doing well and the backlash about Secret War or Secret Invasion and She-Hulk. So they weren't definitively in the bad spot like DC. DC's reputation was definitively bad. But then Marvel, they get to a point where now the public and they realize like, okay, we're not in a good spot. And so that legal trouble is different than Ezra Miller, but it adds to the discussion of we might need to pivot. So now Marvel is trying to pivot, and we're seeing, I wouldn't say the first time we're seeing pivot, because you could argue DC did a pivot too, but not to this level, because this is pretty simple. Kang was the Thanos, and Thanos didn't drive the Infinity Saga, but he was the framework of the Infinity Saga. And Kang, I would argue, not only is the framework of the multiverse saga, but he has driven it more than Thanos did. And I like the idea, to be honest with you, the idea that we get this guy who is multiple. So we first see him in Loki as one way, then we see him in Ant-Man, a little more dangerous, but he's a different way, but he's still not the guy. Then we see another version in Loki 2. We might see another, we could have maybe saw another version where who he's just like a background character in the Marvels, and he's just everywhere. And then eventually what I would have did or would have liked to see was that you do have this group of Kangs that are more in charge than the other ones, because they all want to keep their existence. And then one that is a hothead, kind of like what they portrayed the guy to be in Ant-Man, one that's a hothead eventually kills the other leader, so he is the only leader. And that is the Kang that we're worried about. So you struggle with one version, 2, 3 versions of Kangs, but now you got to go up against the worst Kang. And so it could have worked. It could have had an opportunity for an actor to be so multiple, you know, literally and figuratively in these roles. But honestly, in my opinion, I think the courtroom stuff is the biggest issue. The fact that things aren't going well overall, I don't think it's because of Kang. I think it's because of other things. But all that comes together to where the reports are they're going to pivot maybe towards a Doom. And to me, it just feels weird. Like, I've always said I thought Marvel needed to reset. And I thought you had so many ways that you could do that. And maybe it's hard because people are going to be like, that's not Robbie Downey Jr., that's not Chris Evans, that's not Chris Hemsworth, that's not Chris Pratt, all these Chris's. But okay, fine. I think you take that risk because there is no other answer. These people have left the roles. They did what they had to do. You can't put the MCU on their back anymore. But these characters are bigger than these actors. And so the same discussion with Chadwick. Now I had my mind changed because I heard the reasoning behind why Marvel and Ryan Coogler wanted to go the route they went. But still, in most situations, I would have said, yeah, get a new T'Challa because the character is bigger than the actors. And so while you do have an added layer of potential backlash, people want Iron Man. They want Captain America. They don't want all these D-listers. Now, a lot of these people were D-listers before the MCU, but still, I have no problem adding to the universe with new characters. But I think you just got too big where you can't control what's going on. And I thought a reset made sense just so you could get the characters back. But now it makes sense because you need to get the universe back. And you need to get it in order to where it is continuous. Now they have a Marvel I believe they call it Spotlight, which is essentially an Elseworld thing. And again, you could check the records. I suggested that so long ago. So long. It was before Justice League even came out. I had suggested, I said they need to do Elseworlds because you could see the writing on the wall. It's much like streaming. Like if you really understand the business and the concept and you got a big picture view, you can see the writing on the wall. So you can't just do a cinematic universe and slowly add in all your characters, especially as you get Fox and X-Men and Fantastic Four, because it's going to become huge and it's going to become hard to keep track of. And so you have to be able to have various different avenues. And so the Elseworlds to me always made sense, not only to bring in people that were different and maybe lower level, but so you could tell fun stories. You could bring in a different actor to play Captain America and do, I don't know, whatever. The story I always think of is DC because I like their stories better. But like you could bring in, I don't know, who does people want to play Batman? What's his fate? No, not him. I don't know. You could bring in a person to play Batman. Let's say you bring Ben Affleck back. You bring Ben Affleck back as Bruce Wayne, and you do the story where he becomes the Green Lantern instead of Hal Jordan. You could do that with an Elseworld and you could make good money. And so I always thought it was a good idea. So now Marvel's doing that and that'll help. But I still think you need to get your main universe back into continuity. So everything's in a pivot right now in terms of creativity. DC by nature had to change what they were doing because they had no one in charge and it wasn't working. And so we have to yet to see what James Gunn is going to give us in terms of the whole universe, but he promises a comprehensive universe that is movies, TV, animation, video games. So we'll see how that works. But we're now in a space where Marvel has to pivot after being forced to, and it was unexpected. And so creativity wise, we're seeing a change and we got to really just wait to see what we're going to get. But society wise, I think the genre definitely oversaturated itself. Everybody and that's not just the two main ones. That's the other people doing things. That's The Boys. That's Invincible. That's, what was that? The Samaritan they did. There's a bunch of other random properties that are really leaning into superhero, and a lot of it is good, but it's just a lot of it. And so I do think when you get so much of the same thing, too much of a good thing, you start to see the repetition. You start to see where it's hard to differentiate yourself. And then like when you're the MCU, and Kevin Feige can't be a part of all these projects, you start to see voices sounding very different. You start to see a story that's very different and is not controlled in harmony. So it'll be interesting. I think, there'll be pivots and restructuring, but I think they're going to have to win audiences back because with the streaming era, with just the digital way, they're consuming differently. They're not going to the movies the same unless there's a reason to, because our economy is inflate. Like I'm in a small college town, and so the prices I'm used to are vastly different than when I lived in Chicago. But even those prices have doubled since the pandemic. And so I will rarely go to the movies as much as I did because what used to cost me to go to an IMAX, like I have to pay like double that. And so people aren't going to the movies the same unless there's a big reason to go. Obviously, the pandemic and the strikes have slowed up a lot of stuff. And so it's going to take us a few years to get back onto the point where we're getting a lot of stuff. And we were getting there, but the strikes messed that up. So it's probably another year before we get back into the flow of having continuous good content. But even still, people want to look at that content at home from the ease of their house if it's not a must see. And then people are really into a lot of the streaming content. And so those things are different. It's going to take some winning back the audiences. But I think for me, it's pretty simple. I think you have to focus. Number one, if it's going to be a cinematic universe, you need to focus on making all these pieces fit within the world. Because if it feels like it's not a part of the world you built, then what's the point of having a universe? And I've said before, I think there's some easy ways they could clean it up if they want to do multiverse stuff. Now, most people probably won't because it kind of make things messy. But I think it's an easy way you can do that, to be honest. But either way, you have to get it into a continuity. And then you just got to give us good stuff. I mean, good actors that can take some good material and deliver impactful and powerful scenes. I mean, look at Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer in today's age, you would think would not do anything. Now, Barbie is an IP. It's a famous IP. You got a lot of famous names. It's got a lot of color. It was a movement, but it also was more or less an Oscar movie by Greta Gerwig. So it had all that combined to make it a hit. Oppenheimer on his face, besides Nolan, didn't seem like it was supposed to be a hit. But that's the thing. You go into quality made movies and you get impacted, which is what a good movie is supposed to do. When you get impacted, you want to go tell everybody else about it. And you want them to go see it. And you want to see it again. And so you got to focus on, I think, number one, making sure it all fits in continuity. But then, yes, it needs to be quality control, not quality control to say, hey, does it have the jokes that we need? Does it fit this flavor? No, have the quality control of, is this a good movie? Is this really good filmmaking? Now, that's tricky because Eternal's really good filmmaking. But the audiences, they love that flavor. So I just think overall, Kevin Feige was the linchpin. I think, honestly, the way DC did it was dumb in terms of structure of leadership. But let's just say it was Jeff Johns or Zack Snyder, whoever. It was one person the entire time. Only one person that could make the decisions. I still think there's a possibility that it would not have came out as successful because Kevin Feige is just a different breed. He's a different guy with such not only fandom experience, but producing experience from a lot of different people with top-notch talent, connections, and his own personal skill. There aren't many Kevin Feiges out there. And so I think he's going to be the key to Marvel specifically. Can James Gunn do that? I don't think so, but we'll see. But for Marvel, they have to scale it back so that Kevin Feige could put his fingerprints on all of it. So anyway, there's a lot more we talk about. Yeah, we'll probably talk more at some point as more stuff happens. But that was just my kind of spiel. Go to the comment section. Let me know what you think. Share it around. Get the conversation started. Thumbs up. Subscribe. And if you heard it here, it's official canon.